name is Rebecca Hinchy. Most people call me Beck. I am the out-of-home care programs and policy manager at the Department of Communities and Justice. And we have with us Lauren Ring. Lauren is a senior project officer in the Office of the Senior Practitioner, and her work is currently focused on the review and redesign of DCJ's assessment practice. We also have Elaine Thompson. Elaine is the Director of Practice Quality in the Office of the Senior Practitioner, and one of her responsibilities is DCJ's out-of-home care accreditation program. Before I begin, I would just like to acknowledge that wherever we are today, we are meeting on Aboriginal land, land that was never ceded. I come to you from the Bidjigal lands in southwest Sydney, and I'm paying my respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal colleagues that are online here today. As we all know, there are way too many Aboriginal children and young people in out-of-home care. So today, I would like you to think about the experiences of Aboriginal children in care and your important role in acknowledging the history that has brought them here and what work you can do to keep them safe. Today's presentation will be recorded. If you want to flip over, Heather, that would be great. And it will cover what it is that children need from all of us, how we can strengthen partnerships between DCJ and NGO practitioners to help keep children in care safe, DCJ's safety and care mandate, what has changed and what this means for NGOs. And at the end of the presentation, you'll have a chance to ask questions. I'll just ask that everyone hold their questions until the end, and that you keep any of your questions general in nature so that we don't identify individual children and young people. Given the number of people that are online today, I think it might be easiest probably just to type the questions into the chat. And I will hand over to Elaine and Lauren to take it from here. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Beck. Welcome, everyone. Elaine Thompson here. I am coming to you from Darkinjung land, and I pay my respects to the caretakers of this land, elders past, present and emerging. As Beck said, today is really an opportunity to share with you some of the journey that DCJ has been on with safety and care, which arose from our accreditation renewal probably about this time last year. I'm just conscious there's a few people in the chat saying that they can't hear anything. So I don't know if that is broad and across the stream and I'm talking and no one can hear me, or if I should just keep going. I am going to think I'll just keep going unless someone flags for me that this is all technologically failed. So really what we are going to do is just talk through the parts of safety and care that rely on us working together, and then the parts where we take our divergent paths and in our own case management have full responsibility. So I'll just step you through the next slide, which is the standard that the OCG assesses us on for safety and care. When the OCG came around to our districts, what they indicated to us was a real need to be clear on the different bits of legislation that we're working under. Now, they were obviously only looking at DCJ case managed kids. So this presentation is us just thinking about what have we learnt in DCJ that is maybe worth sharing with you as an NGO sector, noting that the OCG has said nothing to us about OCG safety and care practice. So there's a few different types of reports that come through to DCJ. Thanks. If you could just go to the next slide. Thanks, Heather. So we have our reportable or non-reportable allegations that have reports where there's harm alleged by a carer, a household member or an ACA staff member. or alternate care staff member. And then we have a group of reports where someone has hurt the child, but that person who's causing harm lives outside of the household. And then we have reports that are related to the child's own pain-based behaviour. So that may be some self-harming behaviour, it may be leaving placement, it may be putting themselves in situations that bring some other kind of risk for them. Where we're focusing today is just on the reportable and non-reportable allegations. So when there is any harm that is arising in that child's care environment. So in those situations, we have jointly two sets of legislation that we need to work under. So in DCJ, we're obviously we're working under both simultaneously and responsible for both. The first is the Care and Protection Act. So as you would know, that governs all of our assessments of children in community and in out-of-home care. And then we have the Reportable Conduct Scheme, which you are responsible for that side of things in your NGO, and we're responsible to enact that legislation for all of the DCJ case managed children. When the OCG came around to assess us, what they found is that we weren't so clearly aware of when we were exercising different provisions under the different legislations. So our caseworkers would go out in response to a report to commence the completion of an assessment. But by virtue of doing that, they were stepping into the Reportable Conduct Scheme. And we in DCJ have a very centralised separate unit that does all of our reportable conduct investigations. And they do what you would be doing in your service in terms of sending all of the respective reports up to the OCG at the key points in time. So what we had to do as an agency was really work out how we bring both pieces of legislation together so that when our caseworkers were commencing the assessment, they also understood that there were aspects of the Reportable Conduct Scheme that they were doing, and that some of that is different and very specific. You're all doing your reportable conduct work, so you would know that it is very technical, that part of the legislation, and it requires certain things to be thought about at certain times and really clear documentation and rationale about why you're doing things. So we had to create a system that brought both of our people together, so our staff out there doing the assessments and our reportable conduct unit. The important bit for you to hear in this and hold as we go forward is that DCJ can't delegate its responsibilities under the Care and Protection Act. So this is why it's really important that we work together on this, because we always need to do the assessment under the Care and Protection legislation, but you need to do your reportable conduct part of the work under the Reportable Conduct Scheme. So a little bit about the feedback that the OCG provided to us that is useful for you to know, not only for your own accreditation purposes, but just to help really gain some understanding in why we had to go forward and create a mandate. So really what we heard from the OCG is that unless there is really urgent circumstances where it's really that child can't stay at home or in the care of their carers pretty much that night, we need to work together to bring both bits of legislation happening at the one time. They found for us that because we were out doing assessments and then our reportable conduct was coming in afterwards, that sometimes we weren't doing a lot of the very upfront work that you needed to do with carers. And that was mainly around the technical side of making sure that they understand their rights. So when our staff went in, they did share information with carers and made it clear that they were responding to a report about them, but we probably didn't do all of the very specific stuff that we do with carers and providing them some clear information sheets and next steps. The big part and the bit that we are shifting is when reportable conduct, when something is meeting the threshold for reportable conduct, our investigators use that piece of legislation to get really clear about who we talk to, when we talk to them, and how we do that. So that looks a little bit different than what we might do in a child protection assessment if we didn't have to consider the reportable conduct legislation. And it's because the reportable conduct legislation is much more investigative than the Care and Protection Act, which is much more assessment based. So under that scheme, what they found in our practice is that the work was happening, but maybe not as clearly in the order that is needed for an investigation. So thinking that if you're doing an investigation, part of what we really need to do is make sure that we are not doing anything that potentially compromises the integrity of that. And that means things like being really clear about who we speak to first, being really clear about speaking to people individually. So talking to each carer individually, each child individually, thinking about witnesses that may have been in the household that we need to speak to, and making sure that we interview them in a continuum that doesn't unintentionally jeopardise the integrity of the investigation. So that's some of the things that the OCG pointed out for us that we needed to look at a little bit differently in our assessment. The other thing that they made really clear to us is that the reportable conduct scheme is an allegation-based scheme. So what they found in our casework is that often in the course of going out and talking with carers and children, caseworkers became aware of things that had happened in placement that could potentially be a reportable allegation. Now, every time that was seen, the OCG was able to see that we followed up, and as part of casework, we did whatever we needed to do to provide more support to the carer, keep the child safe, etc. But what we weren't doing is reporting those allegations formally. And because it is an allegation-based scheme, you have to report those allegations, even if in the course of your casework you straight away are able to say that it's not substantiated. So classic example is if a child was to say that their carer hit them, and then in the course of talking with that child more and then talking with the carer, you realise that didn't happen. Because it is an allegation-based scheme, you still have to actually report that through. And then the reportable conduct legislation will kick in and determine what we need to do for going forward with that. So this is probably us getting into the crux of why you've all joined us today. It's about understanding about what does our experience mean for you. So what it meant for us is that we had to develop a mandate for responding to any reports about harm being caused to a child in care. And so when it came to reportable allegations or allegations against a carer, there was automatically a part of that related to NGOs and your care and case management of children. What we need to do, and Lauren will step through that, is be really clear about our roles and responsibilities. Now, we obviously have guidance in this through the relevant bits of legislation, the case management policy that we all share, and now our mandate. And really what we need to just do going forward is be clear about those situations where we work together, because as I said, there's parts of, well, we can't delegate the care and protection legislation assessment. And then we need to be clear about when we will step out and leave things over to you for case management, and helping as well, you just be clear about that line between assessment and reportable conduct, what bits we do, what bits you will do. So I might hand over to Lauren to go through the specifics of the mandate, and that then we will come back together again for some questions and answers. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you for having me, everyone. I'm on the land of the Dharawal people in southwest Sydney, and I have to say, in the work that we're doing at the moment around influencing some of the assessment practice of DCJ, I've learnt more than ever the importance of children in care and children in our child protection work staying connected to culture, community and kin. And so I am making a commitment through all of the work that we've been doing to continue to be a really strong ally and advocate in that space, but also to really listen deeply to the incredibly wise stakeholders and families that we've been working with throughout this practice. If Heather, we can move to the next slide, I'll be able to talk you guys through the safety and care mandate and some of the steps that you're probably really familiar with already. Oh, back one more. It's the one with all of the great circles. There we go. So on screen here, you guys will see that this is the assessment pathway that we've had in place since October last year, when we had our interim safety and care mandate launch. And it's probably something that you are all really familiar with right now, particularly that front end of the diagram where you can see the pre-assessment consultation, the safety decision and the assessment consultation. Part of what we have been hearing since this launched was some really kind of lovely and heartening ways of how a partnership between DCJ and NGOs has been even further embedded as they've been having these really great opportunities to connect before assessments. And so we really are grateful to continue hearing those stories and to learn from the skills of you guys as our partners in this space as well, and the information that you hold that is so important to the way in which we conduct a holistic assessment about the child, the carer and their family. This process, like Elaine was saying, is absolutely guided by our safety and care mandate. And if you pop to the next one, Heather, you guys will be able to see the key components of that safety and care mandate. Those being the ways in which we make allocation decisions around ROSH and non-ROSH reports, and then those opportunities where we do really partner with you guys in our pre-assessment consultations, the safety planning and assessment, and then the assessment closure. We're going to talk about each of these stages in a bit more detail, but we also wanted to be really clear that there is explicit recording advice throughout our mandate for our practitioners to be able to document and evidence the way in which decisions are being made with you guys and also with the families around key casework decisions about a child in care and where their safety is and how we anchor to that. The navigation of the new safety and care mandate absolutely supports practitioners across various nuances of casework when we're working with children in care, including partnerships with our NGOs and reports that also involve reportable allegations. So we are working really hard to make sure that that mandate covers across the many diverse variants that we have going on across our safety and care assessments. The approach is fundamentally led by our New South Wales practice framework, but it also aligns with the Carer Code of Conduct and also the Child Safe Standards for permanent care as well. If you just tick on over a little bit, Heather, one more. Beautiful. This is the bread and butter of the work that you guys are doing since the safety and care launch, and in partnership with DCJ and you guys, this is the space where we really come together for our assessment process and for our safety planning. It's that opportunity to consider danger items and protective abilities in response to the report that's made about the child in care. And together we use our professional judgment, our skills and our relationships to assess the safety of that child in care. And we come back with those 3 outcomes at the end of the assessment. Again, outcomes you're probably really familiar with, but it's safe, safe with plan and unsafe. Safe identifies that time when there are no dangers for the child, and that based on the current information that you and the DCJ caseworkers have been able to uncover, that it's unlikely that the child will be in any kind of immediate danger or serious harm in their current placement. Safe with plan refers to the times when there is 1 or more dangers from the assessment process that have been identified, but there are appropriate protective abilities that we've all been able to canvass and work with the carers. And so a plan has gone in place to mediate those immediate danger items. Safe with plan does come with a couple of conditions though, to make sure that we're all safeguarding the placement, the carer and the child. One of those being, or a number of those being, the dot points that you can see on screen there. So DCS approval alongside approval of the NGO delegate if the safety plan that we are using is to attend to the carer themselves. So if the carer themselves is the person causing harm. We also have to consider that using a safety plan to move a child from their home or to ask a carer to leave their home is unable to happen. This is absolutely considered a reviewable decision. So when we are safety planning with children and with carers, it's in response to the danger identified, and it is outside of those 2 strategies, the child leaving or the carer leaving. The safety plan we're hoping is being written in partnership with the child, the carer and across our services so that we can identify who's the best person to then be supporting that safety plan across the time that it is in action. And we really want to be inviting a safe person into that space as well. So broadening that network so that there are other people to strengthen and galvanise that safety plan. And it also means that there is someone else that is available for the child to call on. A copy of that safety plan should be left with all of those people, the carer, the child and the safe person that's been identified. The safety plan will be reviewed in 72 hours of being put in place. And a part of that review is to identify what is working so that we have some strategies that we can build on as we move into casework actions later on. But it's also to identify that we've hit the safety plan kind of nail on the head and that what we have identified to resolve immediate harm is actually strong enough and is active enough to be able to do that. If it's determined after that 72 hours that the safety plan is going to stay in place and carry over, then that safety plan is actively monitored at least once a week until the assessment, the alternative assessment is completed. So that's at that end of that 30-day period from the time that we've knocked on the door together. The only other time that that safety plan could be resolved across that period is if the dangers actually subside themselves. The final outcome is unsafe. And so that's when 1 or more dangers are present, but the placement absolutely cannot continue. It also includes the times when New South Wales Health might schedule a child or when the Supreme Court has authorised a secure placement. So what we are doing then is we're identifying that there's no interventions that could be put in place that could keep that child safe at home. And we want to be able to provide a clear rationale about why that is in our ACT. So that we can identify what it is that we could not put in a safety plan in order to appropriately respond to safety. Why did we have to move them and what else did we think about before we got there? The final part of the safety and care mandate that you guys would have noticed since October, if you can skip across one more header, is the opportunity for the safety and care meeting. So the safety and care meetings are held at the completion of the alternate assessment, so 30 days from the initial assessment that we've done together, and it's to discuss the assessment outcome. So DCJ will be sharing some more of how things have been finalised and written and recorded on our end. But it's also a place where we kind of put our heads together and think about how to sustain the safety that's been built across the assessment for the rest of the time outside of the assessment period as well. And so what this does is it brings together those statutory requirements that Elaine was talking about alongside those out-of-home care requirements as well. And it's in this space that we're really demonstrating the way that DCJ and our NGO partners are working collaboratively to hit that standard 3 that Elaine was talking about earlier. We're really keen to hear about how the safety and care meetings are going and what feedback you guys have in relation to those. They will absolutely be a part of the next iteration for the PSP policy. So any of the information that you guys currently have or feedback that you have will be really helpful in that space. We have heard of some successful safety and care meetings happening as a group supervision. So there are lots of creative ways that this kind of information exchange can happen. And in that space, you know, all of the kind of regular parties are being invited. So the DCJ caseworker and manager, NGO caseworkers and managers, and then any other support person who was involved in the assessment process. And they can be completed by the SIFDU manager, the permanency coordinator. So there are ways that we can make those meetings happen in different spaces and at different times. DCJ are responsible at the end of that safety and care meeting, and so the end of the assessment process, to be communicating the outcome of the assessment to the carer and to the child, and that includes any findings of a person causing harm. And from there on out, much of the kind of flow on from there goes back to business as usual. So you guys would be responsible for updating the case plan, much as it would already happen outside of a safety and care response. And alongside that, your care reviews and your reportable allegations as well. And we really hope that, you know, that information can come back to DCJ as well, and all of the recording can happen so that the child would be able to access the whole picture of that assessment. And we could swap some of that information back and forth. Like we say, safety and care meetings are something new. They've only been happening since the launch of the mandate in late October last year. So any feedback that you guys have about the ways that they could be strengthened, we're really, really happy to hear. I think that's actually our final slide in terms of content. So like Elaine, wanted to thank you guys for letting us talk at you for the last 40 minutes, but really keen to be able to talk to you guys about any questions or examples that you have and anything that you want us to hear about how things are going in this space.